Coogs house. Yes, it was a rough outing for the Houston Cougars over the weekend on the football field, but doesn't seem to be impacting recruiting at all as Jaivion Martin commits to the Cougs.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs Daily Podcast, all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who can't step by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Please make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what you put your french fries in or what you put on them, as apparently there's a bunch of that's the thing to eat in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Houston heads up to Oklahoma State this weekend. It's upcoming weekend for a morning time kickoff. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda. Make more out of every movement. We got more on that later. It's a great vehicle to work with. So good stuff there later in the show. But today, I want to talk in the first segment about Houston having a positive recruiting effort and movement, I should say, coming out of a tough weekend of football. I also want to, in the same vein, talk about some basketball recruiting updates as they've been slowly rolling in. And last but not least, I do want to spend some time talking about some defensive guys that I'm putting my eyes on. We'll talk to Cody Stovall this week as well, host of Locked Oklahoma State, and solidify that. But I got some eyes on some guys on that defense. But first and foremost, Houston gets a commitment out of Jaivion Martin. Jaivion Martin is a 6'3.5", 250-pound tight end out of Willis, Texas, and had held Houston fairly highly, but ultimately committed to Arkansas. And notably, Arkansas fired Coach Sam Pittman recently. So Jaivion Martin decommitted when that happened, and Houston, for what it's worth, had a strong relationship with him from before. Got to continue to talk to him after the fact, and Jaivion Martin commits to Houston. He's a great football player. He's a big-time tight end, and we've seen how Slade Nagel uses the tight end position. I'm sure it's very enticing, obviously, but ultimately this is a good move for the Cougs in a lot of ways, and you're stealing an SEC commit from your, Willis being in your backyard and all of that. For what it's worth, another former Arkansas commit, Cornell Jackson, 6'2", 315-pound defensive lineman from Auburn, Alabama, had initially committed to Arkansas. He scheduled 3 visits after they decommitting from Arkansas amidst the coach firing as well. Houston is one of those 3. So Houston making the most out of some, let's say, bad news in the state, I guess, almost directly north, I guess technically a little northeast of Houston. And that's all good for the Cougs. Now, I will say getting commitments out of Jaivion Martin's big because, frankly, that's a guy I was a little disappointed didn't commit to Houston outright at the jump, right? And they've got a really strong connection there. He is a good pass-catching tight end, but has the frame to be a good blocking tight end at the next level as well. And so a true dual threat kind of guy at the tight end position is a game changer. If they can turn this into him and Cornell Jackson, getting both out of the Arkansas fallout, that would be huge. Cornell Jackson's a run-plugging 315-pound. He'll probably always be around 310 to 320 in his college career. Probably lose some of the bad weight, gain some of the good weight while he's there, obviously. But a real, true run-plugging, cannot run it in these 2 gaps kind of a guy, right? That's a big, big deal there. And it made me start thinking, okay, well, what about guys Houston feels pretty good about in other recruiting circles, like Oklahoma State, who are playing this weekend in football, also fired their head coach recently and has a number of recruiting ties to the state of Texas. And I think a guy to look at there is like Malik Bracey, a 6'1" corner, Argyle, Texas. Had Houston pretty high on his list. I want to say top 4 is what I last saw before ultimately committing to Oklahoma State. He has since decommitted from Oklahoma State, and he's a Texan. He had Houston high regard, 6'1" corner. It could work out. I don't know if I feel as confident like Brandon Ford, another DFW guy at Crowley High School, had Houston as top 7, but also put out a top 3, and Houston didn't make that list. Brandon Ford has decommitted from Oklahoma State, though, so things could be changing. And I think what's interesting about this is as you're seeing mid-season coach firings, We talked some in yesterday's episode about how that's impacting the present tense roster. Guys, based on when their coach was fired, is saying, I'm just not going to play the rest of the year and take the red shirt. I'm going to transfer out, hit the portal. You got 30 days, all of that, right? What's interesting about this is it's also impacting their nearest future rosters, right? Malik Bracey, Cornell Jackson, Jaivion Martin, those guys are all going to make impacts at these institutions for coaches that are no longer there. Obviously, it's well within their right to pick a new coach to go play for. Big reason they picked those schools was to play for the coach that's no longer there, right? But big deal for each of these guys if they were to look at Houston. Now, I also then started extrapolating in my research, and part of the reason I'm up late doing this is like, okay, this got to be a little big. But you start looking at coaches that are on the hot seat, and maybe coaches that are on the hot seat that like might get warmer, and then ultimately, catch on fire kind of hot seat. And what could be going around? Like the most obvious name to me when I was doing this was at Florida. Billy Napier has been the hot seat for what feels like 3 years now. I guess probably closer to 2. And Billy Napier at Florida has some great talent. He talk about Willis High School and DJ Lagway, right? And the quarterback they've got there. But he recently just got a commitment out of Davian Gross. Now, Davian Gross had Houston in his top 4 and made it a point to correct other outlets about having Houston in his top 4, right? When they only put out a top 3, he's like, no, it's a 4-team race and Houston's in it. He enjoyed his visit. He visited with Keyshawn and the guys that ultimately all committed, right? Big time athlete. He's a wide receiver / running back type of athlete. I think he might project more of the running back type at Houston, but digression aside, he would help a lot, right? I think, if something were to go south at Florida, can you get in late with him because you had such a strong relationship? And frankly, he's from DFW, I guess, but he is from the state of Texas as well. Similarly, Dave Aranda was almost fired a couple years ago, and they're not having a terrible year this year, but I think it is worse than people expected, given the way they finished last season, right? And maybe he's on a warm. I mean, he's definitely on a warm seat. It's how hot did that seat get? I think about them in like their 2026 class and like Jalen Battle, a 6'2", 280-pound defensive lineman who had Houston in his top 3 and ultimately picked Baylor. If Dave Aranda, as a defensive-minded head coach, were to get nixed, what would happen to a guy like Jalen Battle and his recruitment and all of that, right? And what's fascinating about all this is that as it goes further and further and closer to signing day, I actually think it's more likely some of these guys end up being Cougs if the decommitment, recommitment thing all starts to shuffle, right? Because bluntly, it becomes a dollars and cents game. If you're insert school X and you have $5 million handed out in NIL dollars, and you've allocated it, and then suddenly player A, Cornell Jackson or whoever, hits the market, you might have already allocated your money in a weird way that this isn't officially professionalized necessarily, but dollars are getting spent like that, and it's hard to just go find a new salary, for lack of a better phrase, and the NIL budget. This could actually work in Houston's favor, where a lot of Houston's appeal, while Houston is building the NIL world out and is getting more involved and getting better at that by the week, a lot of Houston's appeal to these guys is not, I mean, the NIL can be competitive and also, right, bring in something else. So it's like, okay, maybe we don't quite have exactly dollar to dollar the same amount as the school you think you want to go to. However, we have a good dollar amount and you can play in Houston. You can play with these buddies. You can play with Coach Fritz. You can play with et cetera, right? And you can play with Keyshawn. You can play defense on a team that, you're going to have a lot of points because you're playing opposite Keyshawn, whatever the case may be, right? And I think that actually plays a role in this. And it should be pointed out that Jaivion Martin was on campus visiting last weekend when Houston played Texas Tech. And as poorly as that game went, it seemed to not have any negative impact on their recruitment. If anything, having a lot of blue, loud, boisterous fans, a great game day atmosphere probably helped. In fact, and a quick aside, I'd argue it helped a lot of programs in their recruitment. 2 different top-tier Texas high school basketball girls basketball players committed to Houston as well on Tuesday. Madison Carlton is a 4-star forward at Seven Lakes High School, played for the EYBL champion Cy-Fair Elite. Vi Patter is the third best player in the greater Houston area in this class. She committed to Houston as a 4-star kid on Tuesday after visiting last weekend. Coach Mitchell's doing a great job. He also got Tamia King, a UIL 6A All-State player last year as a junior from Austin Westlake. Great passing forward, played in the Under Armour circuit for San Antonio Finest, and they did pretty well in that as well. That one's particularly nice, actually. A family friend's daughter, Tamia King, and nice to have. I don't know that I did a whole lot of persuading, but I certainly feel like I did a little bit, but excited to get to cheer a friend's daughter on in that kind of a way. A big weekend for recruiting, even if the game didn't go their way. And I think that speaks to a number of programs all capitalizing on the great game day atmosphere that was the weekend, right? Having a Saturday football game to use in your recruiting punch for whatever sport you're recruiting in, I think worked out positively. Now, I want to talk about other things being positive in the basketball recruiting world on the men's side in just 1 second. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda, because right now Mazda is making sure that they craft cars for people to do more than just simply move. Now, Mazda delivers confidence with every ride because they have these IIHS Top Safety Pickle Plus awards. They have more of those than anyone else. Again, I have a toddler. Putting a car seat in a car, it can be a daunting task. You want to make sure that the car you're putting it in is safe. IIHS Top Safety Pick Awards all over the map for Mazda. So make sure you get in a Mazda and behind the wheel of a safe car while you're doing it. Like our players, we sweat every detail with Mazda because when you make every move count, impossible becomes relevant to Mazda. Move and be moved. Is also brought to you by Monarch Money, because most people can't name all their financial accounts or even tell you what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. We don't have the full picture. You can end up leaving money on the table, and that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that helps bring your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. You put off your organizing your finances. Monarch is here for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. I teach, I coach, I podcast, got a lot all in one place. It's nice to have them all happening in one very easy to use, simple dashboard like Monarch. Now, if you don't want to let financial opportunities slip through the cracks, use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here, and basketball's a pretty big deal at Houston. On Tuesday at practice, there were 21 of the 30 NBA teams represented to watch the Coogs practice and get eyes on some Coogs and future NBA players. I'd imagine Chris Sinak, Isaiah Harwell, Kingston Fleming, the upcoming freshman, obviously big deal there. I would not sleep on the fact that also watching Miles Uzan, and also probably going to look at how JoJo Tugler's looking these days. Lots of guys to get eyes on there. And I think that speaks well for the program. I think it's also nice to have that news out there for folks looking to come to Houston. As we talk about recruiting, the big recruiting news for Houston is really in a big recruiting news in a small package, and that is that Darius Bivens has announced a visit to Houston. Now, Bivens is listed at 5'11", and the guy is super shifty, super quick, and it is funny because you put on the highlight clip and you're like, okay, this guy is not dauntingly big at all. If anything, he's kind of diminutive on the screen, right? And it doesn't feel like anyone in the Adidas circuit all summer long could guard him. Like the top level Adidas AAU circuit, I don't think anyone in that could guard him. It was baffling. You think of this game as being a game of giants, and it didn't seem to matter at all. He has the ball on a string, totally works both ways, back and forth, and super shifty, very crafty all of that. But he hits daggers off of pull-ups. He's got a lot of machismo to his game and real swagger to him. I really think even at 5'11", he will have a season in college that he averages over 15 points per game. I very confidently feel that way about it, right? And frankly, over the summer, he averaged almost 17 points per game, almost 6 assists, and over 2 steals. I mean, he is a good, dominant basketball player at the highest levels he's been able to play so far, right? He has scheduled a visit with Houston at the end of this month and will also be visiting Texas Tech at the start of November. And there's the last 2 visits he has on his agenda. Now he's a Mid-Atlantic native, and so it's interesting. He's looking out at Texas for these, options here, but I do think Tech and Houston are the 2 top tier places for him right now. They're both, frankly, the 2 best basketball programs that he's looking at with any seriousness. And I think that he is an ideal Coug in a lot of ways because that swagger, that intense competitiveness he's got about him, I feel like it translates well to what Houston does. And then ultimately, look, we know the defense is the defense, and we know the offense at Houston. At some point, Kelvin puts guys in spots and says, now go get a bucket. Darius Bivens can go get a bucket, right? That part is done. And so I feel like that's a good fit there as well. And then frankly, if Sampson thinks that he can defend at the Houston Cougar level, he gets my thumbs up there because he sees that kind of stuff all the time. And so I think that's a big deal. The inverse of this is the other big Houston recruit right now that kind of seems to be trending more and more towards Houston every day as Arafane, the big New Guinea guy from he plays Iowa United. Now sounds like he may be trending in the right direction for Houston. He visits the 3rd Ward on October 23rd. It's his last official visit scheduled, and it might not be very long after that before we get news on him. Admittedly, like once you've taken your final visit, how much more pondering do you want to do? But he's seen Houston. He's met the staff. The staff went and saw him in Iowa last spring. They watched him play all summer long. If you don't remember us talking about him before, this is the kid that is like going to get to be best friends with Alan Bishop and the weight room staff, obviously. And the conditioning side of that's going to be important for him. But he's easily over 7 feet tall. He might not quite be 7'1" and change, but he's not like 6'11" and change. He's definitely over 7 foot tall. He's easily over 280 pounds, long arms, big frame, and like the touch of Darius Bivens, frankly, like has great touch with the ball, great passer, phenomenal ball handler for a guy that big, good shot. I wouldn't say he's a 3-point shooting threat, a pick and pop guy or anything right now, but he also doesn't have to be. He's so big, he can get to the basket kind of at will. And if you try to send 2 at him, he's going to make you pay because he's a great passer. He sees over the top of defenses. I think the interesting thing about him and Houston as they trend in the right direction together is that this is like his weaknesses, and he's picking Houston as a place to make them strengths, right? Like he will be yelled at a lot in his first year or 2 under Sampson at Houston as he's growing as a defender. And that's totally okay as long as you know what you're signing up for, as he does, right? Because ultimately he's going to be a much better defender whenever he leaves the Houston program than he enters it. And he's such a talented offensive player that I think that'll pair up well. Now, what's interesting, and you still got a shot at Caleb Holt, the 5-star wing out, a top 10 composite guy. It seems like you're still in the race with him. I think what's interesting is start looking at this, people are getting almost like, wait, why isn't this just like last year? We had 3 guys in the top 18 or whatever. And frankly, they were all higher than that before they picked Houston because we know how ranking recruit sites can kind of ding the Big 12 sometimes. First, I would stress that while like Bivens is composite 85th in the country and Gian is composite 15th in the country, Caleb Holt is composite like 7th or 6th in the country. He's in the top 10. You could still very well have the same kind of class. I think Kelvin said it very well, and I'm going to give credit to Chris Gardner, the Houston Round Ball Review here. Great basketball coverage in the whole city of Houston. But Chris said on or talked to Kelvin Sampson on camera on Tuesday and asked him about something about recruiting or how you know when a recruit's a Houston guy. And Sampson, in his very Sampson way, started talking and just kind of never stopped talking, but said that, they recruit their own way and it just has worked. It always seems to work when they find guys that fit what they want to do, and that truthfully, when they look at guards, they're like, hey, we know in our back pocket we have a culture built where like we're probably not going to lose a whole lot of guards because they don't lose guys at transfer portal very often, and they feel very confident that right now that Kingston and Isaiah will be back next year, and if they're not, they'll hit the transfer portal, something like that. But ultimately, they're not going to go promise some rising freshman star class of 2026 guard a spot on the rotation next year's roster because they don't ever guarantee rotational spots or minutes or anything like that to players. And that sometimes means you don't get the 5-star kids. They're very selective about which of those kinds of kids they get. And Sampson even had said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing here, but they'll go pretty far in the recruiting process before they realize that this is a kid that might not work and then back out, right? And again, with the way he's built this program, he has earned every benefit of the doubt on that. Now, with that said, if he really feels that strongly, next year you could have Kingston, Isaiah, Mercy, Cordell, Chase, etc. in the backcourt. You might not need more than a Darius Bivens, and obviously you want to see if you could take a swing at Caleb Holt, and you might not need a whole lot in the backcourt. And that's just the reality of the situation in the class of 2026. Now, meanwhile, class 2027, composite top 10 player Reese Alston is in your backyard at Second Baptist in Houston, and you got a good connection there right now. You also have O'Neal Delancey, who's a kid out of Florida, but was ecstatic to get the Houston offer, loves Houston Cougar basketball style of basketball, right? And so you're feeling good about where you're at already with them. And so it's like, okay, this feels like it might be more of a, I don't know, a kind of thing where you're looking at like a couple years ago, you had Jarris Walker, and then you had like Mercy and Chase, and then you had boom with the class of 2025 with all the 5-stars, right? Like this might be an every couple of years thing because you anticipate having a thick roster full of guys that have put in the time. You're not going to all, I mean, there's only so many minutes a freshman can look at your roster and reasonably expect to have, right? And so interesting stuff to hear out of Sampson from in talking with Gardner there and the Roundball review. He's Roundball review. But I think it's adding up to like that being the definition of this class. They're going to try and put all their chips and make sure if they feel like Arafane is a big hit for them, that's what it seemed to be going. Speaking of big hits, Houston heads up to Oklahoma State this week and play a football game. And I'm trying to break down what their defense might look like, who might be suiting up for them. And I want to get to that in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Prize Picks. Now, every day we make decisions, but when it comes to Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is just such a fun, simple way to add excitement to football. You can pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, CJ Stroud throwing at the right team every time. Whatever the case may be, you just say more than or less than the number they give you, and suddenly you're in the game. Now, it's all kinds of fun. Check on other creators and their lineups and all kinds of clicks across it. Download Prize Picks app today. Use code Locked On College to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here. And speaking about being good, be right, Houston hopes to get right this Saturday against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has had a rough, we'll say 2 years. I guess it's really closer to 18 months. But just a rough go of it. And I looked at some stuff on YouTube, watched them play football, and I thought their defense had some more talent on it. They might be showing. And so I put down a couple of names, and we'll talk to Cody Stovall this week as well at Locked On Oklahoma State. Kind of get a picture of who exactly to expect to see on this defense. Because a big problem with this defense is honestly, because of when they fired Mike Gundy, guys have kind of slowly taken themselves off the roster between the transfer portal and be able to call the first 3 games a redshirt year. That they fired him after the 3rd game meant that These guys were more free agents in a lot of ways than they might have been had they done it after like the 5th game, right? And so I do think their linebackers are strong. Brian McCoy and Brandon Rawls do, I think, pose a threat to the running game. I don't think that they're going to be able to cover like Tanner Koziol or whatever. I don't think they'll even draw that assignment, if being really honest. There's certainly nothing like the kid at Tech, Jacob Rodriguez. But I do think that they're pretty strong against running game. I think Brian McCoy is probably the best player on defense. And he initially he transferred from Akron. He was an all-MAC player at Akron. He's a guy that makes plays, and I think is better in the run game than the pass. But he's certainly not. I mean, he's a good, talented athlete. And frankly, I was kind of surprised to see he transferred in from Akron. He doesn't look like an Akron type guy physically. I don't have his measurables in front of it. I guess he's 6'1", 220. I mean, he's a big, strong guy, and he's a linebacker type. And he scrapes side to side well. He feels hard on run. I don't think he'll be a threat in the pass game, but I also bet he doesn't leave the box a whole lot, right? On their defensive front, which I think is very front of mind after last weekend for Houston, Wendell Gregory is probably their biggest threat. 6'3", 255, and that measurable, when you look at his wingspan, those all look like a pass rush thing. That's why I looked it up to be sure. Was he looks like a pass rusher, but I think he's also probably better against the run game. I think he's just still gaining weight as far as defensive linemen go. He started off at South Carolina, transferred to Oklahoma State this year, and he may transfer out at the end of it. I don't know. But he's probably their best defensive lineman. And if they can get those guys blocked up, I really think their two corners are Ken Harris and Cale Smith. I think Houston can take advantage of these corners. I know I said it last week. Like Parker, you said all the time. But, this week, I don't see the pass rush being the same kind of problem that it was last weekend. Because last week, I think that Houston's receivers did actually win their matchups an awful lot. They didn't get the ball because the pass rush covered up all of the back end problems for the Texas Tech defense, right? And that'll probably be the case for the entire season for Tech. However, I look at this week and see a pass rush that is not quite the same as Texas Tech's. I hope our offensive line is continuing to get healthier as the weeks go on. And I see a lot of chances for like Boogie Johnson to win in coverage, Amari Thomas to win in coverage. We saw finally connect with Kobe Young for a deep shot last week. They only turned it into 3, didn't turn it into 7, but finally connect with Kobe Young for a deep shot last week. And I think you can see more of that kind of thing this weekend. Do I think they're going to put up 69 like Oregon did? No. That's just not what this offense is built to do. And frankly, I also don't think if it ever got too far out of hand, I don't think Willie would do anything like score more than he's not going to ever win a game by that much. That's not unless you're just running the football and doing it running the football. It's not going to ask guys to take a knee, but Willie's not one to rub it in like that, right? And so I wonder when we talk to Cody this week what he thinks about the Oklahoma State defense. Does he go with Brian McCoy? Does he go with Wendell Gregory? Does he go with Ken Harris? Where does he think they have advantages? Because I'm sure as someone to watch them closer, he thinks that, right? I just like Brian McCoy could have 10 tackles and they might all be for loss. So I may be completely wrong in my assessment here. He's a guy that strikes me as being good against the run. He does not scare me against the run, if that makes sense, right? He's going to make plays. He's going to make plays. That happens. I'm just not super, super worried about that in the big picture. Now, part of that is admittedly, I'm thinking of this as a game where Conner Weigman plays. It sounds like on Monday, Conner Weigman was evaluated and he's in concussion protocol. Willie Fritz was confident things were moving in the direction where he would be able to suit up on Saturday. When he talked to the press on Monday, we'll hear throughout the week on injury reports, obviously, too. But all that is to say that if you're looking at a team with Weigman on it, you've seen that those teams can put up points and they can run the football. And having him as a true dual threat quarterback brings you a lot of great options. I've said it a long time, and I think they could win this game with Sion Chris Gramillion taking snaps at quarterback as well. However, that would lead to an offense that you'd probably see Oklahoma State packing the box against, and it becomes much more of a slugfest. It's probably always going to be an ugly game, but an uglier kind of game, right? And so as I look at the defense and those kind of stalwarts there, they got Brian McCoy, Wendell Gregory, and Ken Harris. I think that with Weigman in the game to kind of take the reins as a dual threat quarterback will be okay at all that, right? So we'll see. We'll see how things go. We'll talk to Cody this week. We'll do some more talking about Houston, Oklahoma State. Didn't mean to jump in too much, but I'm excited about bringing in recruits. It's great to see the program continue to move forward. And I think people were really worried about after last weekend, like, would recruits want to come to Houston after watching that in person? And the answer is yes. Defiantly yes. And so we'll talk about more as more happens. We'll bring you the latest each and every day here at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know we go live. Locked on Coogs, primarily Locked on Podcast Network. It means your team every day. Go Coogs.